What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you think you know about 3I Atlas and what's really happening in our solar system right now. While the world debates whether it's a comet or something else entirely, leaked documents and classified observations tell a very different story. One that governments don't want you to hear. The coronal mass ejection hit 3I Atlas just days ago, and what happened next defies every law of physics we understand. Instead of being destroyed or deflected, the object absorbed the energy of 1 trillion atomic bombs and converted it into structured signals beamed directly at Earth. The 40-fold brightness increase wasn't random. It was controlled, deliberate, and impossible for any natural object to achieve. But that's just the beginning. New calculations based on trajectory data from 227 observatories worldwide reveal that 3I Atlas weighs at least 33 billion tons, making it denser than neutron star material. Yet somehow, it's masking its gravitational signature. The mathematics don't lie, but they're telling us something that challenges everything we thought we knew about matter, energy, and the limits of technology. Here's what they're not telling you. The 20 scientists who went public were just the tip of the iceberg. Dozens more researchers had been pressured into silence, their funding threatened, their careers destroyed, for asking the wrong questions. Meanwhile, deep space tracking networks designed for military surveillance have detected structured emissions from 3I Atlas that match no known natural phenomenon. The window for whatever 3I Atlas is planning closes in weeks, not months. The December deadline isn't speculation. It's mathematics based on orbital mechanics and the most sophisticated mission planning ever documented. Whether this represents first contact or something far more ominous, the evidence suggests we're about to discover that humanity has never been alone in the universe. Before we dive into this rabbit hole together, please hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on this developing story. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and the weirdest thing that ever happened to you. Chapter 1. The 20 Scientists' Bombshell. On September 19, 2025, something unprecedented happened that would shatter the comfortable consensus of the astronomical community. A research paper appeared online bearing the signatures of 20 scientists from institutions across 3 continents, and its conclusions were so explosive that within hours, careers were being threatened, funding was being questioned, and the entire scientific establishment was scrambling to contain what they saw as a dangerous breach of protocol. The paper's title was deceptively mundane: Statistical Analysis of Trajectory Anomalies in Interstellar Object 3I Atlas. But buried within its dense mathematical formulations and careful academic language was a conclusion that would keep astronomers awake at night for weeks to come. These 20 researchers had staked their professional reputations on a single, terrifying assertion. 3I Atlas was not behaving like any natural object should. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a planetary dynamics specialist at the European Southern Observatory, was the lead author. Her credentials were impeccable, her methodology beyond reproach, and her conclusion absolutely devastating to conventional explanations. In leaked emails that would later surface through academic freedom of information requests, she wrote to a colleague, "The trajectory data is keeping me awake at night. We're looking at precision navigation that would make our best spacecraft engineers jealous. This isn't random. This isn't natural. And we need to start having very uncomfortable conversations about what that means." The paper's central argument was built on statistical analysis so rigorous that even skeptics struggled to find flaws. When 3I Atlas had been discovered racing through space at nearly 200,000 km/h, Its path had seemed unremarkable beyond its obvious interstellar origin, just another cosmic wanderer ejected from some distant star system and tumbling through the void for millions of years. But as more observatories tracked its movement, a pattern emerged that defied explanation. The object wasn't simply passing through our solar system. It was approaching three of our major planets, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, with what the researchers called impossible precision. The statistical probability of such alignments occurring by random chance? Less than 1 in 5,000. Dr. James Chen, an astrodynamics expert at MIT who had contributed crucial calculations to the analysis, struggled to find earthly analogies for what they were observing. Imagine standing in New York and throwing a dart that hits a bullseye in London, he explained to colleagues in private conversations that were later leaked. Then imagine that same dart somehow ricochets with perfect precision to hit bullseyes in Paris and Rome. That's essentially what we're seeing with 3I Atlas, except the distances are measured in hundreds of millions of kilometers. The mathematical precision was what made the paper so devastating. These weren't vague observations or subjective interpretations. The trajectory data was concrete, verifiable, and available to any institution with the computational resources to analyze it. The 20 scientists had simply done the math that others had been afraid to attempt. Each planetary approach was timed with clockwork precision. 3I Atlas would pass Venus at a distance of 0.2 astronomical units on October 15th. Mars would receive a closer inspection on October 3rd, with the object approaching to within 0.19 astronomical units. Jupiter, the solar system's giant, would be surveyed from 0.36 astronomical units on March 16th of the following year. But it wasn't just the precision that troubled the researchers. It was the efficiency. If 3I Atlas had been designed by engineers to survey the solar system's major bodies, they couldn't have plotted a more elegant course. The object's trajectory allowed it to gather maximum data about each planet while expending minimal energy on course corrections. Dr. Maria Santos, a mission planning specialist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who wasn't officially part of the study but had reviewed the calculations independently, found herself forced to confront possibilities that challenged her worldview. We spend years planning trajectories for our own spacecraft to achieve much simpler objectives, she confided to trusted colleagues. What we're seeing here represents a level of mission planning that suggests either incredible luck or intentional design. The paper meticulously documented every aspect of the trajectory analysis. Orbital mechanics calculations filled page after page, each equation building toward the inescapable conclusion that 3I Atlas was following a path that maximized scientific return while minimizing detection risk. It was the signature of intelligent mission planning. But perhaps most disturbing was the object's approach vector. Unlike typical interstellar visitors that enter the solar system from random directions, 3I Atlas had arrived from the direction of Sagittarius, directly toward the galactic center, where the crowding of background stars would have made early detection nearly impossible. It was as if the object had been deliberately concealed until the last possible moment. The timing was equally suspicious. 3I Atlas had been spotted only when it reached the orbit of Jupiter, giving humanity a mere few months to observe and analyze it before it disappeared behind the sun. A longer observation period would have allowed for more detailed study, potentially revealing secrets that its designers might prefer to keep hidden. Dr. Robert Kim, a computer modeling specialist at Stanford who had run thousands of simulations to verify the trajectory calculations, found himself questioning assumptions he had held throughout his career. Natural objects don't optimize their paths, he explained in private communications. They follow the laws of physics, but they don't demonstrate strategic thinking. What we're seeing here looks like someone plotted this course with specific objectives in mind. The academic response to the paper was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours of its publication, senior astronomers from NASA, the European Space Agency, and major universities around the world issued statements questioning the methodology, the conclusions, and even the professional competence of the authors. Dr. Margaret Thompson, NASA's lead scientist for solar system small bodies, held an emergency press conference where she dismissed the work as speculative analysis that reaches conclusions far beyond what the data can support. Her statement emphasized that 3I Atlas showed clear signatures of being a natural comet, complete with observable outgassing and a developing coma. But the institutional response revealed something troubling. Rather than engaging with the specific mathematical arguments presented in the paper, critics focused on attacking the credibility of the authors. The trajectory data itself remained unaddressed, as if acknowledging its accuracy would legitimize questions that the establishment preferred not to answer. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself at the center of a professional storm. Her department chair at the European Southern Observatory called her into a meeting where concerns were expressed about the appropriateness of her research direction. Colleagues who had collaborated with her for years suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Conference organizers began rescinding speaking invitations. Similar pressure was applied to the other signatories of the paper. Dr. James Chen at MIT reported that his access to certain computational resources had been quietly restricted. Dr. Santos at JPL found herself excluded from mission planning meetings she had previously attended as a matter of course. The message was clear. Challenging conventional wisdom carried professional consequences. But the 20 scientists had anticipated this response. In private communications, they had discussed the risks of publication and agreed that the implications were too significant to suppress for career considerations. If they were correct about 3I Atlas representing artificial intelligence, then humanity deserved to know, regardless of institutional comfort levels. The paper's publication triggered responses far beyond the academic community. Within hours, it had been downloaded over 50,000 times. Science journalists struggled to understand the technical details while grasping for accessible explanations of the implications. Social media platforms saw explosive growth in discussions about alien visitors and government cover-ups. Amateur astronomers around the world began their own trajectory analysis projects, using freely available orbital data to verify the paper's calculations. Remarkably, multiple independent analyses confirmed the mathematical conclusions, even when conducted by observers with no connection to the original researchers. The democratization of the analysis created a problem for authorities attempting to control the narrative. Unlike previous controversial astronomical claims that required specialized equipment or insider access to evaluate, the 3I Atlas trajectory data was publicly available. Anyone with sufficient mathematical background could confirm that the object's path was indeed statistically anomalous. Online communities dedicated to tracking 3I Atlas exploded in membership. Forums that had previously attracted a few hundred dedicated amateur astronomers suddenly found themselves hosting discussions among thousands of participants, including professional scientists who preferred to engage anonymously rather than risk their institutional positions. The 20 scientists had expected professional blowback, but they hadn't anticipated the level of public interest their paper would generate. Dr. Vasquez later admitted that she had hoped for a quiet academic debate about methodology and conclusions. Instead, she found herself at the center of a global conversation about humanity's place in the universe. Intelligence agencies around the world took notice of the paper's conclusions and the public response it generated. Classified briefings were prepared for senior government officials, outlining the potential implications of confirming that 3I Atlas represented artificial intelligence. The scenarios painted were sobering. Everything from peaceful scientific exchange to existential threats to human civilization. But perhaps most significantly, the paper had accomplished something that decades of SETI research had failed to achieve. It had moved the possibility of alien contact from the realm of speculation into the domain of peer-reviewed scientific analysis. 20 credentialed researchers had publicly stated that the evidence supported artificial origins for 3I Atlas. The scientific establishment found itself in an impossible position. Acknowledging the validity of the trajectory analysis would legitimize the possibility that humanity was being visited by alien intelligence. Dismissing it outright risked appearing to suppress legitimate scientific inquiry. The solution seemed to be to ignore the paper entirely, hoping the public interest would fade without institutional engagement. But the strategy backfired. The silence from major astronomical institutions was interpreted by many as confirmation that the paper's conclusions were too dangerous to address publicly. Conspiracy theories flourished in the absence of official responses, often proposing explanations far more dramatic than anything the 20 scientists had suggested. Dr. Vasquez and her colleagues found themselves reluctant celebrities. Their LinkedIn profiles flooded with interview requests from podcasters, documentary filmmakers, and journalists from around the world. Most declined to participate, preferring to let their research speak for itself rather than risk further damage to their professional relationships. But the damage was already done. The paper had introduced a level of scientific credibility to alien visitation theories that had never existed before. The mathematical precision of the trajectory analysis made it impossible to dismiss the conclusions as speculation or wishful thinking. As September ended and October began, Atlas continued its relentless approach through the solar system, seemingly oblivious to the chaos it was causing on Earth. Every day brought new observations, new data points that either supported or contradicted the various theories about its nature. The object had become more than an astronomical curiosity. It had become a test of humanity's willingness to confront possibilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about our place in the universe. And the 20 scientists who had dared to publish their analysis had ensured that those possibilities could no longer be ignored. The trajectory data didn't lie. 3I Atlas was following a path that suggested intentional design rather than random chance. Whether that design originated from natural processes not yet understood by human science or from intelligence beyond Earth remained to be determined. But one thing was certain. The comfortable assumption that humanity was alone in the universe had been shaken to its core by 20 researchers willing to follow the data wherever it led, regardless of the personal and professional costs. The bombshell had been dropped. The question now was whether the scientific community and humanity as a whole were prepared to deal with the implications. Chapter 2. Loeb's mothership theory goes viral. Avi Loeb had built a career on thinking the unthinkable. As the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University and the longest-serving chair in the history of the astronomy department, he'd earned the right to speculate about ideas that would end lesser careers. But even by his standards, what he published on his Medium blog on August 5, 2025, was nothing short of revolutionary. The post began with Loeb's characteristic blend of rigorous mathematics and accessible prose, outlining the basic parameters of 3I Atlas in terms that both colleagues and the general public could understand. He discussed the object's size, speed, and trajectory with the clinical precision that had made him one of the world's most respected astrophysicists. But then came the paragraph that would be screenshot, shared, and analyzed by millions of people around the world. The more likely scenario from an engineering perspective, Loeb wrote with the calm authority of decades in theoretical physics, involves a mothership that releases many probes which perform a reverse Oberth maneuver to slow down at perihelion and intercept Earth, taking advantage of the Sun's gravitational assist. A mothership. The word alone was enough to trigger a media firestorm that would rage for weeks. But Loeb wasn't content to simply drop the concept and retreat to academic safety. He proceeded to describe in clinical detail exactly how such a deployment might work, complete with calculations showing that small probes could reach Earth within months of being released from the main body. The timing, according to his models, would be precise and terrifying. The deployment would occur when 3I Atlas reached its closest approach to the Sun, a moment when the object would be hidden from Earth-based observation behind our star's blinding disk. The arrival window for any released probes, Loeb calculated with mathematical certainty, would be between November 21 and December 5, 2025. The implications were staggering, beyond comprehension. If Loeb was correct, humanity wasn't simply observing an alien visitor passing through our solar system. We were watching the deployment phase of what could be either the most momentous scientific mission in history or something far more ominous. The Harvard professor was careful not to speculate about intentions, but the internet had no such restraints. Within 6 hours of publication, Loeb's blog post had been viewed over 800,000 times. By the end of the first day, that number had exceeded 2 million. News outlets around the world scrambled to contact him for interviews, but the physicist had seemingly vanished from public view. His university email responded with an automated message stating he was unavailable for comment, and his research assistants claimed complete ignorance of his whereabouts. The timing could not have been worse for NASA and other space agencies already struggling to control the narrative around 3I Atlas. Just as they thought they had successfully characterized the object as an unusual but ultimately natural comet, one of the world's most respected astrophysicists had publicly suggested it might be an alien mothership preparing to deploy what could only be described as an invasion force. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, NASA's director of astrobiology and a longtime colleague of Loeb's, found herself in the impossible position of responding to questions about theories proposed by someone she had considered a friend and mentor. Professor Loeb's speculation goes far beyond what the available evidence can support, she stated during a hastily arranged press conference. While we respect his contributions to astrophysics, these particular ideas represent conjecture rather than scientific analysis. But Mitchell's measured response was drowned out by the tsunami of public reaction that Loeb's post had unleashed. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented traffic as people shared theories, fears, and preparations for what many were calling the most significant event in human history. The hashtag #AlienMothership began trending globally within hours, accumulating over 10 million posts in the first week alone. Survival gear retailers reported massive spikes in sales as people prepared for scenarios they couldn't quite articulate, but felt compelled to anticipate. Emergency food supplies, water purification systems, and communication equipment flew off the shelves. Several major cities saw spontaneous protests demanding government transparency about the object, with demonstrators carrying signs reading, "Tell us the truth about 3I Atlas," and "We have a right to know what's coming." The scientific community found itself deeply divided by Loeb's intervention. Some colleagues admired his willingness to explore unconventional possibilities, while others worried that his speculation was damaging the credibility of serious astronomical research. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an astrophysicist at the University of Chicago, captured the frustration of many when she told a science journalist, "Avi has always pushed boundaries, and that's been valuable to the field. But this feels different. This feels like he's abandoned scientific caution entirely." Yet Loeb's analysis wasn't based on wild speculation or wishful thinking. His concept of a reverse Oberth maneuver was grounded in established orbital mechanics, a technique that human engineers had been using for decades to manipulate spacecraft trajectories. The idea involved using a gravitational body's influence to change a vehicle's speed and direction, but in reverse, slowing down rather than accelerating. Dr. James Harrison, a propulsion specialist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who had worked on multiple Mars missions, found himself reluctantly confirming the theoretical soundness of Loeb's scenario. In a peer-reviewed paper published just weeks after Loeb's blog post, Harrison demonstrated that the reverse Oberth maneuver concept was not only possible, but optimal for the kind of mission Loeb described. If you were designing an interstellar mission to deploy probes in a foreign solar system, Harrison wrote with careful academic language that nonetheless supported Loeb's central thesis, this approach would maximize efficiency while minimizing detection risk. It represents elegant engineering that any mission planner would admire. The academic credibility of Harrison's analysis made it impossible for authorities to dismiss the mothership theory as pure fantasy. Here was a NASA scientist publishing in a respected journal, confirming that an alien deployment scenario was not just possible but logical. The endorsement sent fresh waves of speculation through both scientific and popular media. Amateur radio operators around the world suddenly found themselves at the center of the 3I Atlas investigation. Ham radio enthusiasts, many of whom had been casually monitoring the object since its discovery, began reporting unusual signals that seemed to correlate with Loeb's deployment timeline. The signals were weak and intermittent, easily dismissed as equipment malfunction or terrestrial interference, but their timing was too coincidental to ignore completely. Marcus Chen, a retired electronics engineer and longtime amateur radio operator from New Mexico, was among the first to notice structured patterns in the signals he was detecting. "I've been listening to space for 40 years, he explained in a YouTube video that quickly garnered over 3 million views. "I know what cosmic background radiation sounds like. I know what pulsars sound like. This is different. This is organized, almost like it's carrying information." Chen's recordings, when analyzed by independent audio specialists, revealed distinct mathematical patterns that some interpreted as artificial communication attempts. The signals appeared to pulse in sequences based on prime numbers and Fibonacci progressions, patterns that were statistically unlikely to occur naturally, but perfectly consistent with how human scientists might attempt to demonstrate intelligence to alien observers. The amateur radio community became sharply divided over the significance of these observations. Some operators reported similar detections from their own equipment, while others insisted they heard nothing unusual. Online forums dedicated to radio astronomy transformed into battlegrounds between believers and skeptics, with increasingly heated arguments about data interpretation and methodology. Government agencies found themselves facing an information management crisis, unlike anything in their experience. Acknowledging the amateur radio reports would lend credibility to the idea that 3I Atlas was actively communicating. Dismissing them outright risked appearing to suppress legitimate scientific data. The chosen solution seemed to be studied silence, a strategy that only fueled more conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, Loeb's mothership scenario was gaining unexpected support from within the aerospace engineering community. Computer simulations run by independent researchers confirmed that his proposed deployment strategy would indeed be optimal for an interstellar reconnaissance mission. The mathematics were elegant, the physics were sound, and the tactical advantages were undeniable. Dr. Elisa Park, a systems engineer at MIT who specialized in multi-body orbital dynamics, published a detailed analysis of Loeb's scenario that sent shockwaves through both scientific and military communities. Her work demonstrated that 3I Atlas could theoretically deploy dozens of small probes while maintaining its primary trajectory, creating a comprehensive survey network throughout the inner solar system. The deployment pattern Loeb describes would allow systematic reconnaissance of all major planetary bodies while maintaining operational security. Park wrote in language that read more like a military briefing than an academic paper. It represents sophisticated mission planning that exceeds anything in our current capabilities. The international response to Loeb's theory revealed the deep concerns that governments around the world were harboring about 3I Atlas. Space agencies that had initially dismissed alien theories began hedging their statements with carefully crafted language about ongoing investigation and evolving understanding. Russia's response was particularly telling. Dmitry Volkov, head of the Russian Academy of Sciences Institute for Space Research, gave an interview to state media where he suggested that international cooperation on 3I Atlas monitoring should be expanded immediately. This object represents phenomena that no single nation can fully understand alone, he stated with unusual directness. We must pool our resources and share our data if we hope to comprehend what we're observing. China's National Space Administration, typically secretive about their space surveillance activities, suddenly began sharing detailed tracking data with international partners. The unprecedented transparency raised questions about what Chinese scientists might be observing that concerned them enough to break with decades of policy regarding information sharing. The European Space Agency took the unusual step of convening an emergency session of their Space Situational Awareness Program, bringing together experts from across the continent to assess the implications of Loeb's scenario. While the official outcome of that meeting was never made public, leaked documents suggested that the agency was quietly developing contingency plans for managing potential alien contact. Social media platforms struggled to manage the explosion of content related to Loeb's mothership theory. Conspiracy theories multiplied exponentially, mixing legitimate scientific concerns with wild speculation about alien invasions and government cover-ups. Algorithm-driven recommendation systems amplified the most engaging content, which was often the most sensational and least accurate information. The psychological impact of Loeb's scenario began manifesting in measurable ways. Mental health professionals reported significant increases in anxiety-related inquiries, particularly from people obsessed with calculating approach vectors and deployment timelines. Online support groups formed for individuals struggling with what psychologists began terming contact anxiety, the fear that humanity was unprepared for what might be coming. Religious communities found themselves grappling with theological implications they had never seriously considered. Some leaders interpreted 3I Atlas as a sign of divine intervention, while others saw it as a test of faith. The Vatican issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that divine creation encompasses infinite possibilities, while emphasizing that fear should not overcome trust in providential guidance. But perhaps most disturbing was Loeb's analysis of what he termed the stealth deployment advantage. According to his calculations, any probes released by 3I Atlas during its solar approach would be virtually undetectable until they chose to reveal themselves. The combination of solar interference and the probe's presumed small size would make tracking them impossible with current Earth-based technology. The deployment window provides perfect operational cover, Loeb wrote in a follow-up post that received even more attention than his original theory. Any released objects would be masked by solar radiation, hidden in the electromagnetic chaos of our star's immediate vicinity. By the time they became detectable, they would already be wherever their mission required them to be. The implications of this stealth capability were profound. If Loeb was correct, humanity might remain completely unaware of any probe deployment until the objects chose to make contact or reveal their presence. The possibility of alien surveillance operating undetected in Earth's vicinity represented a fundamental shift in how people understood their planetary security. Intelligence agencies around the world found themselves dealing with scenarios that no training had prepared them for. The possibility that Earth might soon host alien technology moved from the realm of science fiction into operational planning reality. Deep space monitoring networks that had been designed to track asteroids and debris suddenly took on national security significance. But Loeb himself remained mysteriously absent from the public debate his theory had ignited. Colleagues reported that he'd canceled all speaking engagements and conference appearances. His Harvard office remained empty, with department staff claiming no knowledge of his location or availability. The disappearance of such a prominent figure only added to the speculation surrounding his dramatic intervention in the 3I Atlas discussion. The mothership theory had fundamentally changed the conversation about humanity's mysterious visitor. What had begun as scientific curiosity about an unusual comet had evolved into global concern about potential alien contact. And with Loeb's calculated deployment window rapidly approaching, the stakes were getting higher every day. Chapter 3: Anomaly Alert. The Growing Structures Mystery, Dr. Zucker. Michael Jang had been conducting routine photometric observations at the European Southern Observatory when he noticed something that would fundamentally change the scientific understanding of 3I Atlas. It was September 27, 2025, just past 2:00 a.m. local time, when his instruments detected readings that made him question his own equipment calibration. 3I Atlas was growing. This wasn't the typical expansion that astronomers expect from comets as they approach the Sun, developing longer tails and larger comas from sublimating ice. Jang's measurements showed that the object's solid nucleus itself appeared to be physically expanding, developing new structural features that hadn't existed in previous observations. Jang spent the next 4 hours rechecking his data, convinced he had made some fundamental error in his analysis. He reviewed his calibration procedures, examined his equipment for malfunctions, and even reanalyzed months of archived observations to ensure he hadn't missed something obvious. But every test confirmed the same impossible conclusion. 3I Atlas was actively changing its physical structure. The first thing any scientist does when they see anomalous data is assume they've made a mistake. Zhang later explained during the emergency press conference that ESO hastily organized. I checked everything twice, then checked it again. I brought in colleagues to verify my methodology, but the evidence was undeniable. This object is transforming in ways that challenge our fundamental understanding of how celestial bodies behave. Zhang's discovery triggered an immediate mobilization of telescopes around the world. Every major observatory with the capability to track 3I Atlas was pressed into emergency service, creating an unprecedented international monitoring network. The data that poured in over the following 72 hours painted a picture that no textbook had prepared scientists to interpret. High-resolution imaging from the Hubble Space Telescope revealed what appeared to be geometric structures emerging from the object's surface. These weren't the random, chaotic formations typically seen in cometary outgassing or debris shedding. They were organized, symmetrical, and appeared to be growing in coordinated patterns that suggested purposeful construction rather than natural evolution. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the imaging specialist at the Space Telescope Science Institute, who had initially been skeptical of alien theories, found herself staring at data that challenged everything she thought she knew about space objects. After 18 straight hours analyzing the Hubble observations, she was finally willing to go on record with findings that would shake the astronomical community. We are observing the emergence of structures that show clear signs of geometric organization, she stated during a hastily arranged live-streamed press briefing that attracted over 5 million viewers. These formations display symmetry, coordination, and growth patterns that are not consistent with any known natural process. The structures appeared to be extruding from specific points on 3I Atlas's surface, growing outward in configurations that looked almost like antennas or sensory arrays. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that they were composed of materials fundamentally different from the main body, showing absorption lines consistent with complex metallic compounds rather than the ice and rock mixture expected from a comet. What made the observations even more disturbing was the speed of the changes. Time-lapse photography showed the structures extending and articulating in real time, with movements occurring far too rapidly to be explained by thermal expansion, gravitational forces, or any other natural mechanism that scientists could identify. Amateur astronomers with sophisticated equipment began reporting their own observations of the growing structures, providing independent confirmation that the phenomenon wasn't limited to a few professional observatories. Carlos Mendez, whose home observatory in Chile rivaled many institutional facilities, captured video footage that would be viewed over 15 million times in its first week online. "I've been imagining deep space objects for 20 years, Mendez explained in his now famous YouTube commentary that accompanied the time-lapse footage. "I understand equipment limitations, atmospheric distortion, and imaging artifacts. What we're seeing here is none of those things. We are watching something actively reconfigure itself in real time, and it's happening at a scale and speed that defies natural explanation." The footage showed 3I Atlas over a 12-hour observation period, with clear evidence of new structures not only growing, but apparently moving and repositioning themselves. The implications were staggering. If the observations were accurate, they were witnessing technology in operation rather than natural phenomena. The scientific community erupted into chaos as researchers struggled to process observations that contradicted decades of established understanding. Emergency meetings were convened at NASA headquarters, the European Space Agency, and major universities around the world. Peer review processes that normally required months were compressed into days as scientists rushed to publish their analyses of the rapidly evolving situation. But perhaps most troubling were the reports coming from radio telescopes that had been monitoring 3I Atlas for electromagnetic emissions. The signals that had been weak and intermittent suddenly became strong and persistent, with transmission bursts that correlated exactly with the emergence of each new physical structure. Dr. Frank Wilson, director of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, found himself in the unprecedented position of acknowledging observations that challenged his lifelong commitment to conventional scientific explanations. "We are detecting structured electromagnetic emissions that correlate directly with visual observations of physical changes in the object," he admitted during a congressional briefing that was later leaked to multiple news outlets. "The probability that this correlation is coincidental approaches mathematical impossibility. The signals weren't random electromagnetic noise or natural cosmic phenomena. Computer analysis revealed mathematical patterns, prime number sequences, and what appeared to be geometric diagrams encoded in the transmission structure. Most significantly, the signals appeared to be directed specifically toward Earth, rather than broadcast randomly into space. Intelligence agencies around the world found themselves confronting a situation that no contingency planning had anticipated. The possibility that humanity was observing the real-time construction of alien technology moved from theoretical speculation into operational reality within the span of a single week. Leaked documents from the Department of Defense revealed that military strategists had quietly activated protocols originally developed during the Cold War for managing unprecedented technological threats. Communication networks were placed on enhanced monitoring status. Deep underground command centers that hadn't been fully staffed since the nuclear tensions of the 1980s suddenly came back to operational readiness. The public response was immediate and intense. Social media platforms experienced repeated crashes under the load of people sharing images, videos, and increasingly desperate theories about the growing structures. News networks abandoned their regular programming schedules to provide continuous coverage of what many commentators were calling the most significant story in human history. Financial markets around the world experienced unprecedented volatility as investors struggled to process the implications of confirmed alien technology. Technology companies saw massive spikes in their share prices based on speculation about possible knowledge transfer opportunities, while traditional industries faced uncertainty about their relevance in a post-contact world. Religious leaders found themselves fielding questions that no theological training had prepared them to answer. The Vatican issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that the universe contains mysteries beyond human comprehension, while emphasizing that divine love encompasses all creation regardless of its origin. Other religious organizations struggled to reconcile their doctrines with the reality of non-terrestrial intelligence. But perhaps most significantly, the growing structures on 3I Atlas appeared to be following a predetermined deployment schedule. Analysis of the emergence pattern suggested that the object was systematically constructing different types of formations, each apparently serving a specific function in some larger design. Dr. Lisa Chen, a systems engineer at MIT who had begun analyzing the structural deployment patterns, published a preliminary report that sent shockwaves through both scientific and military communities. Her analysis suggested that 3I Atlas was constructing what appeared to be a comprehensive sensor array, systematically developing the capability to scan different regions of the solar system. The deployment pattern is too organized, too purposeful to be natural, Chen wrote in a hastily prepared but meticulously documented report. We are observing the systematic construction of what appears to be scientific instrumentation. The object is studying us with the same intensity that we're studying it. As the structures continued to evolve, one truth became inescapable. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it was no longer content to simply pass by. It was actively engaging with our solar system and with us in ways that demanded a response from all of humanity. Chapter 3. The anomalies that don't add up continued. The implications were profound beyond measure. If Chen's analysis was correct, 3I Atlas wasn't just an alien visitor passing through the solar system. It was an active research mission, systematically gathering data about Earth and its inhabitants. Humanity wasn't simply observing first contact. They were the primary subject of investigation by an intelligence that had traveled across interstellar space to study them. Government officials faced the impossible challenge of managing public information about a situation that was evolving too rapidly for traditional diplomatic protocols. Press briefings became exercises in carefully worded, non-denial denials, acknowledging unusual observations while avoiding confirmation of the alien intelligence that seemed increasingly obvious to anyone following these developments. NASA Administrator Janet Peterson found herself delivering what would become one of the most analyzed speeches in NASA's history when she addressed the nation during a primetime television broadcast. "We're observing phenomena that challenge our current understanding of celestial mechanics and material science," she stated, choosing each word with the precision of a diplomatic negotiation. "Our commitment remains unchanged: scientific rigor and public transparency as we work to understand what we are witnessing." But behind the carefully measured public statements, a very different conversation was taking place in classified briefings for senior government officials. The picture painted in those closed-door sessions was of humanity facing something that exceeded every model of first contact that policymakers had ever considered. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like the passive, distant alien intelligence that SETI researchers had imagined for decades. It was active, adaptive, and apparently conducting its own investigation of human civilization while humanity watched helplessly from hundreds of millions of kilometers away. The structures emerging from the object's surface continued to evolve and multiply with each passing day. Whatever 3I Atlas truly represented, it was making its artificial nature increasingly difficult to deny or explain through conventional scientific frameworks. Amateur radio operators reported detecting new types of signals as each structure became operational, transmission patterns that suggested the object was systematically testing different communication protocols and frequency ranges. Some operators claimed to detect what appeared to be scanning patterns, as if the alien technology was methodically examining Earth's electromagnetic signature. The growing features mystery had transformed 3I Atlas from an unusual astronomical object into undeniable evidence of non-terrestrial intelligence. The careful scientific skepticism that had initially greeted reports of anomalous behavior was giving way to the recognition that humanity was witnessing something unprecedented in recorded history. And still, the structures continued to grow. Each new formation added to an increasingly sophisticated array of unknown technology that was operating in real time while humanity watched and wondered what would happen next. Chapter 4: CME Collision, First Contact, or Cosmic Accident. September 24th and 25, 2025 would be remembered as the moments when 3I Atlas transformed from mysterious anomaly to undeniable proof that humanity was dealing with something beyond their understanding of natural phenomena. The event that triggered this transformation was unprecedented in the recorded history of space science: a direct collision between an interstellar object and one of the most violent forces that our sun can unleash. A coronal mass ejection, CME, the explosive release of billions of tons of charged particles from the sun's corona, had erupted on September 19th with the fury of 1 trillion hydrogen bombs. These events occur regularly as part of the sun's natural cycle, hurling magnetized plasma into space at velocities exceeding 1,000 km/s. NASA's Space Weather Prediction Center had been tracking this particular CME using their standard monitoring protocols, and their sophisticated computer models predicted it would pass harmlessly through empty space, missing all major planetary bodies by comfortable margins. The models hadn't accounted for 3I Atlas being in the path of destruction. Dr. Sandra Martinez, a heliophysicist at the National Solar Observatory, who specialized in solar-wind interactions, was monitoring the CME's progress when her instruments registered something that defied every principle of space physics she had studied throughout her career. The collision occurred at precisely 14:37 Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, on September 24th, when the leading edge of the coronal mass ejection slammed into 3I Atlas with energy equivalent to the detonation of countless nuclear weapons. A CME impact should either completely destroy a small object or simply flow around it with minimal interaction. Martinez explained during the emergency scientific briefing that was hastily convened as the data poured in. What we observed was neither of those expected outcomes. What we witnessed challenges our fundamental understanding of how matter and energy interact in space. Instead of being vaporized or swept aside by the incredible forces, 3I Atlas appeared to actively manage the collision, channeling the massive influx of charged particles through the mysterious structures it had been growing over the previous weeks. The object's brightness increased by a factor of exactly 40, transforming it from a telescopic curiosity into something temporarily visible to the naked eye from Earth, despite its enormous distance. But the truly extraordinary aspect wasn't the dramatic brightness increase. It was the controlled nature of the entire process. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that the energy absorption was highly selective, with different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation being processed through different parts of the object's increasingly complex structural array. The phenomenon resembled nothing so much as a sophisticated technological system designed specifically to harvest and utilize the chaotic energy of stellar storms. Dr. James Thomson, a plasma physicist at Princeton University, who had dedicated decades to studying solar-wind interactions with planetary magnetospheres, found himself questioning the fundamental assumptions that had guided his entire scientific career. The object appears to have actively managed the CME encounter, he wrote in a classified report that would later be leaked to investigative journalists. This level of electromagnetic field manipulation and energy management requires technology that exceeds our current understanding by orders of magnitude. The energy absorption process lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, during which time 3I Atlas systematically converted the chaotic plasma storm into organized electromagnetic emissions. Radio telescopes around the world detected structured signals emerging from the object during this period, transmissions that bore unmistakable signatures of artificial intelligence and deliberate communication attempts. The signals were unlike anything that had ever been detected from space. They weren't the random electromagnetic noise that characterizes most cosmic phenomena, nor were they the simple mathematical patterns that scientists had long speculated might represent first contact scenarios. These were complex, multi-layered transmissions that appeared to carry vast quantities of information encoded in sophisticated protocols that human technology couldn't begin to decipher. Dr. Alan Foster, director of the SETI Institute, who had spent his career searching for exactly this type of signal, found himself in the surreal position of announcing that humanity had potentially received its first confirmed extraterrestrial communication. The signal structure demonstrates mathematical precision, information density, and encoding sophistication that indicates advanced technological intelligence, he stated during a press conference that was simultaneously broadcast on every major news network worldwide. We appear to be witnessing information transfer on a scale and level of sophistication that strongly suggests non-terrestrial origin. The content of the transmissions remained frustratingly encrypted, resistant to every decoding methodology that Earth's most advanced computer systems could deploy. Cryptographic experts from the National Security Agency, Britain's government communications headquarters, and equivalent organizations around the world were quietly assigned to what became the highest priority code-breaking effort since the Allied forces worked to crack the Enigma cipher during World War II. The results were both fascinating and terrifying. The signals appeared to be encrypted using mathematical principles that human cryptography had not yet discovered or implemented. Some analysts suggested that the encryption methodology itself might constitute part of the intended message, demonstrating the sender's technological capabilities rather than attempting to conceal specific information content. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that the transmissions weren't being broadcast randomly into the void of space. Careful analysis of the signal propagation patterns revealed that they were being deliberately beamed toward Earth, with some transmission components appearing to target specific geographic regions, including major population centers and critical technological infrastructure. Dr. Maria Santos, a communication theory specialist at the University of California, Berkeley, published an analysis that sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and intelligence agencies worldwide. Her research suggested that 3i Atlas wasn't simply attempting to communicate with humanity. It appeared to be conducting a systematic technological survey of human civilization. The transmission patterns correlate strongly with global population density, electromagnetic signatures from major urban centers, and the geographic locations of our most advanced scientific installations, Santos wrote in a peer-reviewed but heavily redacted report. This appears to represent systematic reconnaissance and data gathering rather than an attempt at peaceful communication. The implications were profound and terrifying. If Santos's analysis was accurate, humanity wasn't just observing alien technology in their solar system. They were being systematically cataloged and assessed by an intelligence that had deliberately sought them out across the vast distances of interstellar space. Government responses around the world shifted dramatically from scientific curiosity to urgent national security concerns. Military installations were placed on heightened alert status. Critical infrastructure systems were hardened against potential electromagnetic interference. Emergency protocols that had existed only as theoretical exercises and classified planning documents were quietly activated. The public response was equally dramatic and far more visible. The CME collision and subsequent signal transmissions had been observed by amateur astronomers and radio operators around the world, making it impossible for authorities to control the information flow or manage public perception of the events. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented traffic loads as people shared real-time updates, technical analyses, and increasingly panicked speculation about alien intentions. The hashtag #LarchukCME collision accumulated over 50 million posts within the first 48 hours. Video platforms crashed repeatedly under the load of people uploading their own observations and commentary. Online communities dedicated to tracking 3i Atlas exploded from thousands of members to millions within days of the collision. Every piece of new data was immediately dissected, analyzed, and debated by crowds of citizen scientists who often matched or exceeded the analytical speed of official scientific institutions. Marcus Rodriguez, the amateur astronomer from Arizona whose early observations had garnered widespread attention, found himself accidentally coordinating a global information network that included professional researchers, military personnel, and ordinary citizens, united by their determination to understand what was happening. "We're not just passive observers anymore," Rodriguez explained in a video broadcast that attracted over 8 million viewers. "We're active participants in the most critical investigation in human history, and we cannot rely exclusively on official channels to provide us with the complete truth about what's occurring." The democratization of 3i Atlas research created unprecedented challenges for authorities who were accustomed to controlling information flows during sensitive situations. Every major development was documented and shared by multiple independent sources before official statements could be prepared and released. Government agencies found themselves responding to public discoveries rather than leading the scientific investigation. Religious communities worldwide struggled to process the theological implications of confirmed alien intelligence actively investigating human civilization. The CME absorption event had provided undeniable evidence that 3I Atlas possessed technological capabilities far exceeding anything in human experience, forcing even the most skeptical observers to acknowledge that they were confronting something unprecedented. Pope Francis issued a carefully crafted statement calling for calm reflection and emphasizing that divine creation encompasses infinite possibilities beyond human understanding. Other religious leaders found themselves grappling with doctrinal questions that had never been seriously considered by theological scholarship. The energy management capabilities demonstrated during the CME collision raised disturbing questions about the object's potential military applications. If 3I Atlas could systematically harvest and redirect the energy of a coronal mass ejection, what other forms of energy manipulation might it be capable of performing? Military strategists worldwide began modeling scenarios involving technology that could weaponize stellar phenomena or manipulate electromagnetic fields on planetary scales. The implications for national defense were staggering, rendering traditional military capabilities potentially obsolete in the face of such advanced technological capabilities. Dr. Eliza Park, the MIT systems engineer who had been analyzing 3I Atlas's structural developments, published a supplementary report focusing specifically on the energy management systems revealed during the CME encounter. Her analysis suggested that the object had demonstrated capabilities that violated several assumed limitations of engineering physics. The selective energy absorption, real-time electromagnetic field manipulation, and coordinated system response indicate technological capabilities that approach what we might consider fundamental physical limits. Park wrote in language that read more like a threat assessment than an academic paper. These capabilities suggest engineering principles and energy manipulation technologies that exceed our current understanding by potentially centuries. The international scientific community found itself struggling to maintain traditional peer review processes in the face of rapidly evolving developments that seem to outpace conventional academic publishing timelines. Emergency protocols were established for sharing critical data, but the sheer volume and significance of new observations strained collaborative frameworks that had been designed for much more routine research scenarios. Space agencies around the world quietly began repositioning satellites and deep space monitoring equipment to maximize observation capabilities for 3I Atlas's continued approach. The object's demonstration of active technological capabilities had transformed it from a scientific curiosity into a potential threat that required continuous monitoring. The CME collision had also revealed something else that troubled analysts studying the event data. The energy absorption process appeared to have enhanced 3I Atlas's technological capabilities rather than simply providing power for existing systems. New structural formations had emerged during and immediately after the collision, suggesting that the object was using harvested stellar energy to expand its operational capacity. Amateur radio operators reported detecting entirely new categories of signals following the CME encounter, transmission types that hadn't existed in their monitoring data prior to the collision. The signals suggested that 3I Atlas had activated additional systems or capabilities that had previously remained dormant. The timing of the collision raised additional questions that made some observers deeply uncomfortable. The CME that struck 3I Atlas had been a relatively routine solar event, but the object's response suggested that it had been prepared for exactly such an encounter. The systematic nature of the energy harvesting process implied advanced knowledge of solar weather patterns and deliberate positioning to intercept the coronal mass ejection. If 3I Atlas had intentionally positioned itself to encounter the CME, the implications were staggering. It would suggest that the alien intelligence possessed detailed knowledge of solar behavior and had planned its approach to take advantage of stellar energy sources for its own technological requirements. The collision event had fundamentally altered the conversation about 3I Atlas, from speculation about its nature to urgent questions about its intentions and capabilities. The object had demonstrated technological sophistication that exceeded human engineering by unknown margins, and it was actively using that technology to investigate human civilization. As September ended and October began, 3I Atlas continued its relentless approach toward the inner solar system, now clearly revealed as something far more complex and potentially dangerous than anyone had initially imagined. The CME collision had stripped away any remaining possibility that the object was natural in origin, leaving humanity to confront the reality that they were being visited and studied by an intelligence whose capabilities and intentions remained completely unknown. Chapter 5. Impossible Mass. 33 billion ton nightmare. Dr. Richard Kett had spent 3 sleepless nights running calculations that should have been routine, but were producing results that challenged everything astronomers thought they understood about celestial mechanics. Working alongside Avi Loeb and Peter Vess, the South African astronomer was analyzing 4 months of positional data for 3I Atlas when they discovered something that would force the scientific community to confront an impossible reality. The object wasn't following the trajectory it should have been following. This wasn't about the precision navigation that had already troubled researchers. This was about basic physics. When an object moves through space, it responds to gravitational forces, solar radiation pressure, and any outgassing from its own surface. These forces create tiny but measurable changes in trajectory that astronomers use to calculate mass, composition, and internal structure. But 3I Atlas was behaving as if it were immune to forces that should have been affecting its motion. We analyzed 4,022 individual position measurements from 227 observatories worldwide. Kett explained during the press conference that would later be described as the moment when the 3I Atlas mystery became undeniably supernatural. The data spans 412 months of continuous observation, providing unprecedented precision in tracking this object's movement. The analysis revealed something that violated fundamental assumptions about how objects behave in space. Despite clear evidence of massive outgassing, the kind of material ejection that should create significant rocket-like forces, 3I Atlas showed no measurable deviation from a pure gravitational trajectory. The upper limit of any non-gravitational acceleration was smaller than the measurement error of the instruments themselves. This created an impossible equation. The Webb Space Telescope had measured the object losing 150 kilos of material every second, ejected at velocities of 440 ms. According to Newton's laws of motion, this mass loss should have been pushing 3I Atlas off course by amounts that would be easily detectable. But the object continued moving as if nothing was happening. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, a celestial mechanics expert at the European Space Agency who had initially been skeptical of alien theories, found herself forced to confront mathematics that made no sense within conventional physics. If an object is losing mass at the rate we're observing, and that mass is being ejected in non-symmetrical patterns, basic conservation of momentum requires trajectory changes, she stated during an emergency meeting of the International Astronomical Union. The absence of such changes implies either that our understanding of physics is fundamentally flawed or that we're observing technology that can violate conservation laws. The implications were staggering. To remain unaffected by the forces that should have been pushing it off course, 3I Atlas would need to be far more massive than any reasonable estimate based on its size and presumed composition. The calculations were straightforward, but their conclusion was almost impossible to accept. The minimum mass required to explain the trajectory stability was 33 billion tons. To put this figure in perspective, it was roughly equivalent to the mass of a small moon compressed into an object with a maximum diameter of 5 to 12 kilometers. The density requirements approached those found in neutron stars, materials so compressed that a teaspoon would weigh as much as a mountain. But neutron star material couldn't exist in the temperature and pressure conditions of interplanetary space. Dr. James Mitchell, a materials physicist at MIT who specialized in extreme matter states, was brought in to evaluate whether any known materials could account for such incredible density. His analysis, completed over a frantic 72-hour period, concluded that no natural substance could maintain such compression outside the core of a collapsed star. We're looking at density values that require either exotic matter states that haven't been discovered or internal structural engineering that exceeds our technological capabilities by orders of magnitude. Mitchell reported in his hastily prepared but meticulously detailed analysis. The mass-to-volume ratio suggests internal architecture that approaches the theoretical limits of matter organization. The 33 billion-ton calculation created a crisis that extended far beyond astronomy. If 3I Atlas really possessed such incredible mass, then its gravitational influence on other objects in the solar system should have been detectable by now. Spacecraft trajectories should have been affected. The orbits of asteroids in its vicinity should have shown perturbations. But careful analysis of tracking data revealed no such effects. This led to an even more disturbing possibility. Perhaps 3I Atlas was somehow masking or controlling its gravitational signature, demonstrating technology that could manipulate one of the fundamental forces of nature. The implications for physics and engineering were revolutionary, but the implications for human security were terrifying. Dr. Sarah Kim, the Caltech astrophysicist, who had become one of the most vocal advocates for taking 3I Atlas seriously, published a detailed analysis of what controlled gravity technology might mean for an advanced civilization. Her paper, though rushed through publication to meet the urgency of the situation, painted scenarios that kept defense analysts awake at night. Gravitational manipulation technology would represent the ultimate expression of engineering capability, Kim wrote in language that was simultaneously scientific and ominous. An intelligence capable of controlling gravitational fields could reshape matter at the atomic level, manipulate planetary orbits, and harness energy sources that dwarf anything in our current understanding. The mass revelation triggered immediate responses from space agencies and military organizations worldwide. If 3I Atlas truly possessed exotic matter engineering, then every assumption about technological limitations and defense capabilities needed immediate revision. NASA quietly activated deep space monitoring protocols that had been theoretical exercises just weeks earlier. The agency's Planetary Defense Coordination Office, originally established to track potentially hazardous asteroids, suddenly found itself dealing with an object that might pose threats that no conventional defense system could address. The European Space Agency convened an emergency session of their Space Situational Awareness Program, bringing together experts in gravitational physics, material science, and theoretical engineering. The classified outcomes of that meeting were never made public, but leaked documents suggested that European scientists were developing contingency plans for managing contact with technology that exceeded human capabilities by potentially millennia. Military strategists worldwide found themselves modeling scenarios that challenged every assumption about warfare and defense. An object capable of controlling its gravitational signature could potentially manipulate satellite orbits, disrupt communication networks, or even affect tidal forces on planetary scales. Traditional concepts of deterrence and defense became meaningless when confronting such capabilities. The public response to the mass revelation was immediate and intense. Social media platforms struggled to manage discussions about gravity control technology and exotic matter engineering. Science fiction concepts that had been purely theoretical suddenly seemed potentially real, triggering widespread speculation about the implications for human civilization. Amateur astronomers and citizen scientists began their own verification attempts, using publicly available tracking data to confirm the trajectory analysis that had led to the 33 billion ton conclusion. Multiple independent calculations supported the professional analysis, creating a consensus that crossed institutional boundaries. Dr. Lisa Park, the MIT systems engineer whose earlier work had analyzed 3I Atlas's structural developments, published a follow-up study that examined the engineering requirements for exotic matter containment. Her analysis suggested that the internal architecture needed to maintain such density would itself represent technology beyond current human understanding. Containing exotic matter requires electromagnetic field control, quantum state manipulation, and structural engineering at scales from subatomic to macroscopic, Park wrote in her comprehensive technical assessment. The integration of these technologies into a stable, functional system suggests engineering capabilities that approach theoretical limits of what's physically possible. The implications extended beyond simple technological superiority. If 3I Atlas represented engineering that approached the limits of physical law, then its creators had achieved something close to absolute technological mastery. The gap between human capabilities and such advancement would be measured not in centuries, but in fundamental understanding of reality itself. Religious communities worldwide grappled with theological implications that traditional doctrine hadn't anticipated. The demonstration of technology that could manipulate fundamental forces raised questions about the nature of creation itself. Some religious leaders interpreted such capabilities as evidence of divine intervention, while others struggled to reconcile unlimited technological power with concepts of divine authority. The Vatican issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that divine creation encompasses possibilities beyond human comprehension, while emphasizing that spiritual authority transcends technological capability. Other religious organizations found themselves developing entirely new theological frameworks to address the implications of encountering intelligence with near godlike technological abilities. Intelligence agencies faced the challenge of assessing threats from technology that exceeded every model they had developed for evaluating foreign capabilities. Traditional intelligence gathering methods became irrelevant when dealing with capabilities that might include gravitational manipulation, exotic matter engineering, and potentially other technologies that humans hadn't yet discovered. The 33 billion ton revelation also raised disturbing questions about 3I Atlas's energy requirements. Maintaining such incredible density, controlling gravitational signatures, and operating the complex technological systems that had been observed would require energy sources far beyond anything in human experience. Dr. Robert Chen, an energy systems specialist at Caltech, who had been modeling the power requirements for 3I Atlas's observed capabilities, published calculations that were both fascinating and terrifying. His analysis suggested that the object might be drawing energy directly from the quantum vacuum, tapping into the fundamental energy that underlies all matter and space. The energy density required to maintain the observed capabilities exceeds anything we can generate or even imagine generating, Chen wrote in his technical assessment. The object appears to be accessing energy sources that we can barely describe theoretically, much less harness practically. The quantum vacuum energy hypothesis added another layer of impossibility to the 3I Atlas mystery. If the object could extract energy from empty space itself, then it possessed technology that could operate indefinitely without external fuel sources. Such capability would make it essentially immortal from an engineering perspective. The mass analysis had also revealed something else that troubled researchers studying the data. The trajectory calculations suggested that 3I Atlas's incredible density wasn't uniform throughout its structure. Instead, the mass appeared to be concentrated in specific regions that corresponded to the locations where new technological structures had been growing. This pattern suggested that the object was actively redistributing its exotic matter to support different functions as needed. The capability implied real-time control over matter states that approached manipulation of reality itself at the fundamental level. Amateur radio operators monitoring 3I Atlas reported detecting new types of signals following the publication of the mass analysis. The transmissions appeared to be increasing in both frequency and complexity, as if the object was responding to human recognition of its technological sophistication. The signals showed characteristics that some analysts interpreted as testing patterns, systematic probes of different communication protocols and frequency ranges. The timing correlation with the mass revelation suggested that 3I Atlas was aware of human analytical capabilities and was adjusting its behavior accordingly. This raised the disturbing possibility that the object was not only studying human civilization, but was actively monitoring human scientific progress and understanding. The implications for information security and strategic planning were profound. The 33-billion-ton nightmare had transformed 3I Atlas from a mysterious visitor into undeniable proof that humanity was confronting intelligence with technological capabilities that bordered on omnipotence. The object represented engineering that approached the theoretical limits of what physics allowed, operated using energy sources that humans could barely comprehend, and demonstrated awareness of human analytical capabilities. As October progressed and 3I Atlas continued its approach toward the inner solar system, each new observation added to a growing picture of technological supremacy that made human capabilities seem primitive by comparison. The mass revelation had forced humanity to confront the possibility that they were being evaluated by intelligence whose capabilities were so advanced that the distinction between technology and natural law had become meaningless. Chapter 6: Solar Blackout, the October Disappearance. October 29, 2025, marked the beginning of what astronomers would later call the most frustrating and terrifying period in the history of space observation. On this date, 3I Atlas would reach perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, and in doing so would disappear behind our star's blinding disk for nearly 6 weeks. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for an intelligence that preferred to operate without human oversight. Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the Space Telescope Science Institute had been dreading this moment since the first trajectory calculations confirmed 3I Atlas's path through the solar system. We're about to lose visual contact with the most significant object ever detected in space, she explained during what would be the final press briefing before the blackout period began. For the next month and a half, we'll be completely blind to whatever activities 3I Atlas might be conducting behind the Sun. The astronomical community had experienced solar conjunctions before. Planets regularly pass behind the Sun from Earth's perspective, temporarily disappearing from view until they emerge on the other side. Mars, Venus, and even Mercury routinely vanish for weeks at a time during these predictable celestial alignments. But 3I Atlas was different. The previous months of observation had revealed an object that was actively changing, growing new structures and demonstrating technological capabilities that suggested it wasn't simply a passive visitor to the solar system. The timing of the solar blackout raised uncomfortable questions about intentional planning. Avi Loeb's mothership theory had specifically identified the perihelion passage as the optimal moment for conducting covert operations. According to his calculations, any probes or secondary craft released during this period would be undetectable from Earth, masked by the overwhelming electromagnetic interference generated by the sun's corona. Dr. Sarah Kim at Caltech had been working around the clock to model what 3I Atlas might accomplish during its hidden passage. Her analysis painted scenarios that kept space agencies and intelligence organizations awake at night. The solar blackout provides perfect operational cover, she wrote in a classified report that was later leaked to investigative journalists. Any technological deployment, trajectory modification, or reconnaissance activity conducted during this period would be completely invisible to Earth-based observation. The implications were staggering. If 3I Atlas was indeed an artificial construct with hostile intentions, the next 6 weeks would provide an ideal window for preparing whatever actions its controllers might be planning. Conversely, if the object represented a peaceful scientific mission, the blackout period might be when it conducted its most intensive data collection and analysis activities. NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office found itself in the unprecedented position of preparing for threats that no protocol had ever anticipated. Traditional asteroid tracking relied on continuous observation to predict future positions and assess collision risks. But 3I Atlas represented something far more complex than a simple impact threat. It was an intelligent system that might emerge from the solar blackout with dramatically altered capabilities or objectives. The space agency quietly activated deep space monitoring networks that had been developed for tracking military satellites and debris. Radio telescopes around the world were reconfigured to listen for any signals that might leak around the edges of the sun's electromagnetic interference. Even the most optimistic estimates suggested that these efforts would detect only the strongest transmissions, leaving most of 3I Atlas's potential activities completely unobservable. The European Space Agency took the extraordinary step of repositioning several of their deep space monitoring satellites in an attempt to maintain some observational capability during the blackout. The maneuvers required burning precious fuel reserves and would significantly shorten the operational lifespans of the affected spacecraft. But the potential intelligence value was considered worth the sacrifice. Russia's space agency, Roscosmos, made similar preparations, though their efforts remained largely classified. Leaked communications suggested that Russian scientists were particularly concerned about the possibility that 3I Atlas might emerge from the solar passage with altered trajectory parameters. Such changes could only be accomplished through active propulsion, confirming beyond doubt that the object was under intelligent control. China's National Space Administration, continuing their unprecedented transparency regarding 3I Atlas observations, shared detailed predictions about when the object should become visible again if it continued on its current trajectory. The calculations provided a timeline that the international community could use to determine whether the object had made any course corrections during its hidden passage. Amateur astronomers worldwide prepared for the most frustrating period in their collective experience. For months, they had been contributing crucial observations and analysis to the understanding of 3I Atlas. Suddenly, they would be reduced to helpless waiting while the most important object in human history conducted unknown activities beyond their ability to observe. Marcus Rodriguez, whose Arizona Observatory had become a focal point for citizen science efforts, organized a global network to monitor the sun's corona for any unusual activity that might indicate 3I Atlas's presence. "We may not be able to see the object directly," he explained in a video that attracted over 12 million viewers. "But we might be able to detect secondary effects if it's actively interacting with the solar environment. The network Rodriguez established included thousands of amateur astronomers across 6 continents, all coordinating their observations in an attempt to maintain some awareness of 3I Atlas's activities. Solar observation required specialized equipment and careful safety protocols, but the dedication of the amateur community resulted in an unprecedented monitoring effort. Professional solar physicists found themselves suddenly collaborating with amateur observers who had never studied the sun before. The 3I Atlas crisis. Dr. Lisa Santos at the National Solar Observatory reported that her institution was receiving more data about solar activity than ever before in its history, most of it from observers who had redirected their attention from deep space to our nearest star. The psychological impact of the approaching blackout was measurable across human society. Social media platforms saw explosive growth in discussions about what 3I Atlas might be doing during its hidden period. Anxiety support groups reported increased membership as people struggled with the uncertainty of not knowing what was happening in their own solar system. Religious communities prepared for a period of intense spiritual reflection and prayer. Many leaders interpreted the solar blackout as a test of faith, a time when humanity would be forced to trust in divine providence while remaining ignorant of events that might determine their species' future. Special prayer services were organized in churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples around the world. The stock markets experienced unprecedented volatility as investors attempted to price in scenarios ranging from peaceful contact to existential catastrophe. Technology companies saw their valuations swing wildly based on speculation about potential knowledge transfer opportunities. Defense contractors experienced similar fluctuations as analysts debated the relevance of conventional weapons against technology that appeared to violate physical laws. Government agencies faced the challenge of maintaining public order during a period when official information would be essentially non-existent. Contingency plans were activated for managing civil unrest that might result from rumors, speculation, or panic about 3I Atlas's hidden activities. Communication strategies were developed for responding to the inevitable conspiracy theories that would flourish in the absence of concrete data. The timing of the solar blackout created additional complications for the academic community. Research projects that had been hastily initiated to study 3I Atlas would be forced into hiatus just as they were beginning to produce meaningful results. Funding agencies struggled to maintain support for investigations that might become irrelevant, depending on what the object accomplished during its invisible period. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead author of the paper that had first documented 3I Atlas's anomalous trajectory, found herself in the strange position of having successfully predicted humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, while being unable to observe what might be the most crucial phase of that contact. "We've spent months documenting that this object demonstrates intelligent behavior," she explained during her final press interview before the blackout. "Now we have to wait and see what that intelligence chooses to do when it knows we can't watch." The international space community established unprecedented information-sharing protocols for the blackout period. Any detection, no matter how minor or ambiguous, would be immediately distributed to all participating organizations. The cooperation represented a level of transparency that would have been impossible during the Cold War era. But the magnitude of the 3I Atlas crisis had forced even traditional competitors to work together. Intelligence agencies prepared for what some analysts called the longest blind spot in surveillance history. Satellite networks that had been designed to monitor terrestrial threats suddenly seemed inadequate when facing the possibility of alien technology operating in Earth's immediate cosmic neighborhood. New protocols were developed for managing strategic planning when fundamental assumptions about technological capabilities might change overnight. The solar blackout also raised disturbing questions about information warfare and psychological operations. If 3I Atlas represented hostile intelligence, the invisible period might be deliberately designed to create maximum anxiety and uncertainty among human populations. The object's creators would be well aware that 6 weeks of complete uncertainty would stress human institutions and social structures in ways that direct confrontation might not achieve. Conversely, if 3I Atlas represented peaceful intentions, the blackout might be an unfortunate consequence of orbital mechanics rather than deliberate planning. Solar conjunctions were predictable astronomical events that occurred regardless of any intelligence's preferences. The apparent strategic timing might be coincidental rather than intentional. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford, who had been modeling 3I Atlas's behavior using game theory and strategic analysis, published a paper examining the various scenarios that the blackout period might represent. His analysis suggested that the information warfare value of the timing was so significant that it was unlikely to be accidental. An advanced intelligence planning contact with a younger civilization would understand the psychological impact of periods of uncertainty and invisibility, Kim wrote in his strategic assessment. The solar blackout provides maximum leverage for psychological influence while maintaining operational security for whatever activities are being conducted. The amateur radio community prepared for intensive monitoring during the blackout period. While visual observation would be impossible, radio signals might still be detectable if 3I Atlas chose to transmit during its passage behind the sun. Special listening protocols were established to detect even the weakest signals that might indicate continued activity. Some radio operators reported detecting unusual background patterns in the days leading up to the solar conjunction, suggesting that 3I Atlas might be testing communication systems before disappearing from view. The signals were too weak and ambiguous for definitive analysis, but the timing raised the possibility that the object was preparing for a period of active but hidden operations. The final observations of 3I Atlas before it disappeared behind the sun showed continued structural development and apparent technological enhancement. The object that would emerge from the blackout period might be significantly different from the one that entered it, having used the hidden weeks to complete whatever construction or modification projects it had been conducting. Amateur astronomers captured the last visible images of 3I Atlas as it approached the sun's corona, documenting an object that had transformed dramatically since its first detection months earlier. The growing structures and technological enhancements were clearly visible in high-resolution photography, providing a baseline for comparison when the object eventually reappeared. The psychological preparation for the blackout period included educational campaigns about the nature of solar conjunctions and the limitations they imposed on Earth-based observation. Scientific organizations worked to manage public expectations and reduce panic by explaining that the disappearance was temporary and predictable, even if the object's activities during that time remained unknown. But no amount of education could completely alleviate the anxiety of knowing that the most important object in human history was about to spend 6 weeks conducting unknown activities beyond human observation. The solar blackout represented humanity's first experience with forced ignorance about events that might determine their species' future. As October 29th approached and 3I Atlas prepared to disappear behind the sun, the global community braced for a period of uncertainty unlike anything in recorded history. The next 6 weeks would test humanity's ability to maintain social cohesion and rational decision-making while confronting the ultimate unknown. Chapter 7: Trajectory Truth, the 0.005% coincidence. The mathematics were unforgiving, and Dr. James Chen knew that numbers didn't lie. even when they told stories that human minds struggled to accept. As the lead trajectory analyst for the MIT team that had been tracking 3I Atlas since its discovery, Chen had spent countless hours verifying calculations that pointed to a conclusion so improbable that it challenged the very concept of coincidence. 3I Atlas wasn't simply passing through the solar system. It was conducting what could only be described as a precision reconnaissance mission, approaching Venus, Mars, and Jupiter with navigational accuracy that exceeded anything human space agencies had ever achieved. The statistical analysis was devastating in its clarity. Chen had calculated the probability that any randomly arriving interstellar object would approach these three planetary targets with the precision demonstrated by 3I Atlas. The mathematics involved complex orbital mechanics, gravitational interactions, and the vast three-dimensional space through which such an object might approach the solar system. We're looking at a combined probability of approximately 0.5%, Chen explained during the classified briefing that had been hastily arranged for senior officials at NASA, the Department of Defense, and the National Science Foundation. To put this in perspective, you're more likely to be struck by lightning while simultaneously winning 3 separate lotteries than to observe such precise planetary approaches occurring by random chance. The trajectory analysis revealed planning sophistication that suggested intimate knowledge of solar system dynamics. 3I Atlas would pass Venus at a distance of 0.2 astronomical units on October 15th, providing optimal conditions for surface mapping and atmospheric analysis. The Mars encounter on October 3rd would bring the object to within 0.19 astronomical units, close enough for detailed geological surveys while avoiding gravitational capture. The Jupiter flyby scheduled for March 16th of the following year demonstrated perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the entire trajectory. The approach distance of 0.36 astronomical units would allow comprehensive study of the gas giant's atmospheric dynamics, magnetic field interactions, and moon systems, while using Jupiter's massive gravitational field to modify the object's outbound trajectory for optimal solar system exit velocity. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, NASA's Director of Mission Planning, who had overseen trajectory design for dozens of robotic space missions, found herself studying 3I Atlas's path with professional admiration and growing unease. This represents mission planning at a level that exceeds our best capabilities, she admitted during internal NASA discussions that were later leaked to congressional investigators. The energy efficiency, the scientific return optimization, and the gravitational assist utilization demonstrate planning sophistication that suggests either incredible luck or intentional design. The precision wasn't limited to the major planetary encounters. Detailed analysis revealed that 3I Atlas's trajectory would also provide excellent observation opportunities for the asteroid belt, the Kuiper belt objects, and various smaller bodies throughout the solar system. The path maximized scientific data collection while minimizing energy expenditure and detection risk. But perhaps most disturbing was the approach vector analysis. Unlike typical interstellar objects that entered the solar system from essentially random directions, 3I Atlas had arrived from the direction of Sagittarius, directly toward the galactic center, where the density of background stars would have made early detection extremely difficult. Dr. Maria Santos, a stellar dynamics expert at the University of California, Berkeley, had modeled the visibility conditions for objects approaching from different directions. Her analysis revealed that 3I Atlas had chosen the approach path that would minimize its detection window while maximizing its observation time once discovered. An object approaching from the Sagittarius direction remains effectively invisible until it reaches the orbit of Jupiter. Santos wrote in her comprehensive visibility analysis. This approach vector provides only a few months of observation time before solar conjunction, creating maximum uncertainty about the object's intentions and capabilities. The timing analysis was equally troubling. 3I Atlas had been timed to arrive during a period of minimal solar activity, avoiding the intense radiation and particle bombardment that characterized solar maximum conditions. The approach also coincided with favorable planetary alignments that optimized the scientific value of each encounter. Chen's team had modeled thousands of possible approach scenarios, testing different arrival times, vectors, and trajectories to determine which combinations would provide optimal reconnaissance opportunities. Their analysis confirmed that 3I Atlas had followed what amounted to the perfect path for studying human civilization, while minimizing detection and observation time. The navigational precision extended to smaller details that revealed even more sophisticated planning. The object's rotation period had been carefully selected to optimize solar panel efficiency if it was using solar power, while its structural orientation maximized gravitational stability during high-acceleration maneuvers. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford, who had been analyzing 3I Atlas using game theory and strategic planning models, published a paper that examined the trajectory from the perspective of intelligence-gathering operations. His analysis suggested that the path demonstrated operational security awareness that exceeded most military reconnaissance missions. The trajectory shows characteristics of a carefully planned intelligence operation, Kim wrote in his strategic assessment. The approach vector, timing, planetary encounter sequence, and solar conjunction timing all serve to maximize information gathering while minimizing target awareness and response time. The implications for human security were profound. If 3I Atlas represented hostile intelligence, its trajectory provided optimal conditions for assessing human technological capabilities while avoiding detection until it was too late for defensive responses. The object could complete its reconnaissance mission and disappear beyond human reach before effective countermeasures could be developed or deployed. Intelligence agencies worldwide had begun treating the trajectory analysis as a threat assessment rather than a scientific curiosity. The precision navigation demonstrated capabilities that exceeded human technology by significant margins, suggesting that 3I Atlas's creators possessed detailed knowledge of solar system dynamics and human space surveillance capabilities. The amateur astronomy community had conducted their own verification of the trajectory calculations using publicly available orbital data to confirm the professional analysis. Multiple independent studies supported the conclusion that 3I Atlas was following an impossibly precise path through the solar system. Amateur astronomers like Marcus Rodriguez found themselves accidentally participating in what amounted to a global intelligence analysis project. "We're not just tracking a space object anymore," Rodriguez explained in one of his increasingly popular video updates. "We're documenting evidence of planning and intelligence that operates on scales we've never encountered before." The trajectory analysis had also revealed something that troubled researchers studying the object's behavior. The path optimization wasn't just efficient, it was elegant. The gravitational interactions, timing sequences, and energy management demonstrated an aesthetic appreciation for orbital mechanics that suggested intelligence with a deep understanding of celestial dynamics. Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the Space Telescope Science Institute found herself comparing 3I Atlas's trajectory to classical music compositions, noting the harmonic relationships between different orbital elements and the sophisticated way complex gravitational interactions were orchestrated to achieve maximum effect with minimum effort. There's an artistic quality to this trajectory that goes beyond mere efficiency. Walsh observed during one of her increasingly philosophical presentations about the object. We're seeing navigation as an art form, demonstrating intelligence that finds beauty in the mathematics of celestial mechanics. The artistic interpretation raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of the intelligence behind 3I Atlas, an entity capable of appreciating the aesthetic dimensions of orbital mechanics while conducting what appeared to be systematic reconnaissance, represented a level of sophistication that challenged human assumptions about the relationship between intelligence, technology, and consciousness. Religious communities worldwide grappled with the theological implications of intelligence that demonstrated both technological supremacy and aesthetic sensibility. Some leaders interpreted the elegant trajectory as evidence of divine inspiration, while others worried about the spiritual implications of encountering intelligence that might exceed human understanding in all dimensions. The trajectory analysis had also provided insights into 3I Atlas's likely origin and mission duration. Backtracking the object's path through galactic space suggested a journey that had lasted potentially millions of years, indicating either incredible patience or technology that could maintain operational status across geological timescales. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had calculated the energy requirements for maintaining an active mission across such time periods. Her analysis suggested that 3I Atlas must possess either self-repair capabilities that approached immortality or energy sources that could operate independently of external inputs for essentially unlimited durations. We're looking at engineering that treats million-year mission timelines as routine planning considerations, Park wrote in her technical assessment. This suggests technological maturity that approaches the theoretical limits of what's physically possible. The multi-million-year journey timeline raised disturbing questions about the patience and persistence of 3I Atlas's creators. An intelligence willing to conduct reconnaissance missions across such timescales represented strategic thinking that dwarfed human planning horizons. The implications for understanding alien motivations and intentions were sobering. Military strategists worldwide found themselves developing threat models for intelligence that operated on million-year timelines, while demonstrating technology that exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude. Traditional concepts of deterrence and defense became meaningless when confronting such vast differences in technological capability and strategic patience. The trajectory precision had also revealed that 3I Atlas possessed detailed knowledge of human space surveillance capabilities and limitations. The object's approach path exploited gaps in Earth's detection networks while timing its arrival to minimize observation opportunities. This suggested that 3I Atlas's creators had conducted preliminary reconnaissance of human technological capabilities before launching their main mission. The implications for information security and strategic surprise were profound, indicating that humanity might have been under observation for far longer than anyone had realized. Amateur radio operators monitoring 3I Atlas reported detecting transmission patterns that seemed to correlate with the object's approach to each planetary target. The signal suggested that the object was actively collecting and transmitting data as it conducted its precision reconnaissance mission. The correlation between trajectory, precision, and communication activity reinforced the interpretation that 3I Atlas was conducting systematic intelligence gathering rather than casual exploration. The object appeared to be following a predetermined data collection protocol that had been planned in advance with remarkable attention to detail. As October progressed and 3I Atlas approached its carefully planned encounters with Venus and Mars, the trajectory analysis continued to provide evidence of intelligence that operated according to principles that challenged human understanding of planning, patience, and technological capability. The 0.05% coincidence had become impossible to dismiss as chance. forcing humanity to confront the reality that they were being systematically studied by intelligence whose capabilities and intentions remained completely unknown, despite months of intensive observation and analysis. Chapter 8. Dark Forest Theory. Academic war erupts. The scientific community had always prided itself on rational discourse and evidence-based debate, but the 3I Atlas crisis was testing those principles in ways that no one had anticipated. By early October 2025, what had begun as academic disagreement about an unusual astronomical object had evolved into something approaching intellectual warfare, with careers, funding, and fundamental worldviews hanging in the balance. Dr. Christopher Hayes, the distinguished chairman of the International Astronomical Union's Commission on Interstellar Objects, found himself at the center of a controversy that was splitting the astronomical community into increasingly hostile factions. On one side stood researchers who insisted that 3I Atlas represented natural phenomena that could be explained through conventional physics and chemistry. On the other side, a growing coalition of scientists argued that the evidence pointed unmistakably toward artificial intelligence and potentially hostile intentions. The debate had been triggered by the publication of several papers exploring what researchers called the dark forest hypothesis as applied to 3I Atlas. The concept, popularized by Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin, suggested that advanced civilizations in the universe might maintain silence and secrecy to avoid detection by potentially hostile intelligences. Applied to 3I Atlas, the theory painted a terrifying picture of first contact as potential threat rather than opportunity. Dr. Adam Hibbert, a researcher at the Initiative for Interstellar Studies in London, had co-authored one of the most controversial papers exploring the dark forest implications of 3I Atlas's behavior. Working alongside Adam Crowell and Avi Loeb, Hibbert had analyzed the object's trajectory and timing from the perspective of strategic reconnaissance rather than scientific exploration. The dark forest hypothesis suggests that any intelligence capable of interstellar travel would approach unknown civilizations with extreme caution and potential hostility. Hibbert wrote in the paper that would fracture the astronomical community. The behavior patterns we observe in 3I Atlas are consistent with reconnaissance activities that precede either peaceful contact or preemptive elimination of potential threats. The paper outlined scenarios that kept defense analysts awake at night. If 3I Atlas represented advanced reconnaissance for a civilization that viewed other intelligences as existential threats, humanity might be facing evaluation for elimination rather than contact. The object's systematic survey of planetary bodies and apparent technological capabilities could represent threat assessment rather than scientific curiosity. The academic response was swift and brutal. Senior astronomers from major institutions issued joint statements condemning what they called irresponsible speculation that risked public panic over natural phenomena. The criticism focused not just on the conclusions, but on the researchers' willingness to publish such speculative analysis without definitive proof. Dr. Margaret Thompson, NASA's lead scientist for solar system small bodies, became the public face of the institutional opposition to dark forest theories. The suggestion that 3I Atlas represents hostile alien intelligence is not supported by the available evidence, she stated during a press conference that was carried live on major news networks. Such speculation undermines public confidence in scientific methodology and responsible research. But Thompson's measured response was undermined by leaked communications, revealing that NASA had quietly begun developing contingency protocols for managing potential alien contact scenarios. Internal documents showed that the agency was taking dark forest possibilities seriously enough to begin preliminary planning for defensive responses. The leak triggered a new wave of controversy, as researchers questioned why institutional leaders were publicly dismissing theories they were privately investigating. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose original trajectory analysis had first suggested artificial intelligence, found herself caught between competing pressures to either support or distance herself from increasingly dramatic theories about 3I Atlas's intentions. The data suggests intelligence, but intelligence doesn't necessarily imply hostility, Vasquez explained during one of her increasingly rare public appearances. We must distinguish between evidence-based conclusions and speculative scenarios, even when both point toward possibilities that challenge our assumptions about the universe. The academic battle lines were drawn not just around interpretation of evidence, but around fundamental questions about scientific responsibility and public communication. Younger researchers, particularly those with less established careers, tended to support open discussion of all possibilities, including hostile scenarios. Senior scientists, many with institutional responsibilities, preferred more cautious approaches that emphasized uncertainty rather than specific threat assessments. Dr. Sarah Kim at Caltech found herself representing a middle position that satisfied neither extreme. Her analysis acknowledged that 3I Atlas demonstrated technological capabilities far exceeding human achievements, while arguing that hostile intentions were only one of many possible explanations for the object's behavior. We are confronting intelligence that operates according to principles we don't understand, Kim wrote in her attempt to bridge the growing academic divide. Attributing human motivations like hostility or benevolence to such intelligence may be fundamentally inappropriate. We may be dealing with minds that think in ways that make our categories of friend and enemy meaningless. Kim's philosophical approach attracted support from researchers in fields outside traditional astronomy. Anthropologists, psychologists, and philosophers began contributing to the 3I Atlas debate, bringing perspectives that challenged assumptions about intelligence, communication, and motivation that astronomers had taken for granted. Dr. Maria Santos at UC Berkeley, who had extensive background in both astronomy and cognitive science, published a paper that examined the 3I Atlas perspective of contact linguistics and xenopsychology. Her analysis suggested that human attempts to interpret alien motivations were probably doomed to failure without much better understanding of how non-human intelligence might operate. We are trying to understand minds that evolved under completely different conditions and may operate according to logical frameworks that we cannot access, Santos wrote in her interdisciplinary analysis. The dark forest hypothesis assumes that alien intelligence would think strategically about threats and opportunities in ways similar to human military planning. This assumption may be completely invalid. The interdisciplinary perspective added new complexity to the academic debate while providing little additional clarity about 3I Atlas's actual intentions. If human categories of thought were inadequate for understanding alien intelligence, then both hostile and peaceful interpretations might be equally meaningless. Religious scholars joined the academic discussion, bringing theological perspectives that further complicated attempts to reach consensus about 3I Atlas's significance. Some religious thinkers interpreted the object as evidence of divine intervention, while others saw it as a test of human faith and wisdom in the face of cosmic uncertainty. The Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that the universe might contain forms of intelligence beyond human understanding, while emphasizing that divine authority transcended any technological capabilities that such intelligence might possess. Other religious organizations struggled to develop theological frameworks adequate for addressing potential contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. The academic warfare extended beyond scholarly journals, into social media platforms, where researchers found themselves defending not just their scientific conclusions, but their professional competence and personal motivations. Twitter battles erupted between proponents of different theories, with some exchanges becoming so heated that university administrators felt compelled to issue statements about appropriate professional conduct. The public followed these academic battles with fascination and growing concern. Social media algorithms amplified the most dramatic exchanges, often presenting scientific disagreement as evidence that experts didn't understand the situation any better than ordinary citizens. This democratization of the debate further undermined institutional authority while increasing public anxiety about 3I Atlas. Amateur astronomers and citizen scientists found themselves choosing sides in the academic war, with some supporting researchers who advocated caution and others rallying behind scientists who argued for open discussion of all possibilities, including hostile scenarios. Online forums dedicated to 3I Atlas became battlegrounds where technical analysis mixed with philosophical debate about how humanity should respond to cosmic uncertainty. The dark forest theory gained additional credibility when military analysts began publishing their own assessments of 3I Atlas as a potential security threat. These analyses, while careful to avoid definitive conclusions, acknowledged that the object's demonstrated capabilities represented potential threats that required serious contingency planning. Colonel Janet Rodriguez, a strategic analyst at the Department of Defense who specialized in emerging technological threats, published a declassified assessment that treated 3I Atlas as an intelligence-gathering platform regardless of its ultimate intentions. Her analysis focused on capabilities rather than motivations, arguing that the distinction was irrelevant for defense planning purposes. Whether 3I Atlas represents peaceful scientific exploration or hostile reconnaissance, its demonstrated technological capabilities exceed our defensive systems by orders of magnitude, Rodriguez wrote in her military assessment. Prudent security planning requires preparing for scenarios in which such capabilities might be used against human interests. The military perspective added new urgency to the academic debate, while highlighting the practical implications of different theoretical frameworks. If 3I Atlas represented a potential threat, then academic disagreement about its nature was more than a scholarly exercise. It was potentially a matter of species survival. Intelligence agencies worldwide began recruiting academic experts to support classified analysis efforts, creating a parallel research network that operated outside traditional peer review processes. This compartmentalization of research further fragmented the academic community while reducing the information available for public scrutiny. The recruitment of scientists into classified programs created ethical dilemmas for researchers who found themselves possessing information they couldn't share with colleagues or the public. Some scientists declined to participate in classified analysis, preferring to maintain their ability to engage in open scientific discourse. Others felt obligated to contribute their expertise to national security efforts regardless of the impact on their academic freedom. Dr. Pertiha, Robert Kim at Stanford, found himself caught between competing obligations when he was approached to participate in a classified assessment of 3I Atlas's strategic implications. His decision to decline the invitation while continuing to publish openly about the object's characteristics made him a target for both institutional pressure and public scrutiny. Science functions best when information flows freely and conclusions can be challenged through open debate. Kim explained during a controversial interview that criticized the trend toward classifying 3I Atlas research. The moment we start hiding our analysis behind security classifications, we lose the ability to distinguish between evidence-based conclusions and speculation driven by fear. Kim's position attracted support from scientists who worried about the militarization of 3I Atlas research, but it also drew criticism from researchers who argued that some aspects of the situation were too sensitive for public discussion. The debate highlighted fundamental tensions between scientific openness and national security concerns that had no easy resolution. The academic war over 3I Atlas interpretation reflected deeper philosophical divisions about how science should engage with phenomena that challenged established frameworks. Traditional scientific methodology required extensive verification and peer review before accepting revolutionary conclusions. But 3I Atlas was evolving too rapidly for conventional analysis timelines. Some researchers argued for accelerated publication and review processes that could keep pace with the object's changing characteristics, while others insisted that maintaining rigorous standards was more important than speed. The tension between thoroughness and urgency created additional stress within the academic community. The dark forest hypothesis had transformed academic discussion of 3I Atlas from scientific curiosity into existential assessment, with implications for the future of human civilization. Whether the object represented opportunity or threat remained unclear, but the intensity of academic debate reflected the magnitude of what humanity might be facing. As October progressed and 3I Atlas continued its approach towards solar conjunction, the academic community remained fractured between competing interpretations of evidence that everyone agreed was unprecedented in the history of astronomy.